Some places vanish from maps, not by accident, but by force. Atheria is one of them. No records. No survivors. Just silence, thick, heavy, and listening. Tonight, we open a door that should have stayed shut. But be warned, once you hear the whispers, you can never unhear them.
The old Jeep, a relic as battered and worn as the forgotten roads, coughed and sputtered its way up the final incline. Beside Dr. Aris Thorne, a man whose life revolved around the silence of forgotten places, his apprentice, a student of folklore and forgotten histories, consulted a tattered map. Atheria, Thorne murmured, his voice a low hum of anticipation. A village swallowed by the woods, erased from every official record after the silence began. The journey had been long, carving a path through overgrown logging trails and ancient, gnarled forests that seemed to lean in, watching. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a primal perfume that spoke of things ancient and undisturbed. As the Jeep broke through the final curtain of trees, Atheria unveiled itself. It wasn't the desolate ruin Thorne had expected. Instead, a peculiar, almost unnatural stillness hung over the place. Houses, their timber walls bleached to a pale gray, stood erect, their windows like vacant eyes staring out at nothing. A few, however, were half collapsed, their roofs caved in like broken skulls. There was no wind here, not a rustle of leaves, not a bird's call. Just a profound, unsettling quiet. It's preserved, the apprentice whispered, the sound feeling jarringly loud in the oppressive silence. Thorne nodded, his eyes scanning the skeletal remains of what was once a bustling village square. A skeletal well pump stood sentinel, its handle rusted into a permanent gesture of despair. Surrounding it, the remnants of what might have been a market stood, stalls long since rotted away, leaving only faint impressions in the overgrown grass. They approached the nearest house, its wooden door ajar, groaning on a single, strained hinge as Thorne pushed it open. The air inside was thick with dust and the cloying scent of decay, but beneath it, something else, a faint, metallic tang, like old blood and rust. Empty shelves lined the walls, a few overturned wooden bowls and scattered, petrified rodent droppings were the only signs of previous life. The apprentice's skin prickled. This wasn't just abandonment, it felt like a sudden, violent cessation, as if the villagers had simply vanished mid-stride, their lives cut short, leaving behind a lingering shadow. As dusk began to paint the sky in bruised purples and deep oranges, they made their way to what was clearly the largest structure, the village church. Its steeple, unlike many others, remained largely intact, piercing the sky like a broken spear. The double doors, heavy and made of dark oak, hung ajar, revealing a maw of impenetrable darkness within. Thorne, ever the cautious scholar, produced a powerful expedition flashlight. Its beam cut through the gloom, illuminating overturned pews, scattered hymnals, and a thick layer of dust. But it was the altar that drew their gaze, and held it. Scratched deep into the aged wood, crudely but with undeniable force, was a single word, "They hear." Below it, the wood was stained dark, not with dust, but with what appeared to be dried, ancient blood. The stains formed irregular patterns, almost like distorted symbols. The apprentice's breath hitched. This wasn't just a church, it felt like a tomb, a memorial to something unspeakable. They decided to make camp in the Jeep, reasoning it was the safest place in this unsettling quiet. Sleep, however, proved elusive. The silence of Atheria was not peaceful, it was a heavy, suffocating blanket woven with the threads of forgotten lives and lingering dread. Every creak of the Jeep's suspension, every snap of a distant twig, was amplified, setting their nerves on edge. Around midnight, it began. At first, it was subtle, a feeling of being watched, a pressure in the very air around them. Then, they heard it. A whisper, faint and indistinct, carried on the non-existent breeze. It sounded like a child's voice, mournful and lost, drifting from the direction of the church. The apprentice dismissed it as imagination, a trick of the mind in this desolate place. But then came another whisper, clearer this time, and closer. It wasn't English, or any language they recognized, but the tone was unmistakable, a plea, laced with an agony that resonated deep within their bones. Thorne, who had been feigning sleep, stirred. "Did you hear that?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble. Before the apprentice could answer, more whispers joined the chorus, growing in number, coalescing into a mournful, undulating hum. They seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the empty houses, from the tangled woods, from the very ground beneath them. They were not words, not truly, but a symphony of sorrow, a chorus of despair. Then, a new sound emerged, cutting through the low hum of voices. A scraping. A slow, deliberate scrape, like heavy stones being dragged across rough earth. It seemed to originate from the direction of the church. The apprentice's breath hitched. Thorn grabbed his powerful expedition flashlight, his face grim. "We need to see." Against every fiber of their being, against the instinct to flee, they found themselves stumbling out of the jeep, Thorn's beam cutting a shaky path through the inky blackness. The air grew colder with every step, and the metallic, acrid scent intensified, stinging their nostrils, making their eyes water. The whispers grew louder, urgent now, pulling them towards the church like an invisible tide. As they approached, the scraping sound grew more defined, punctuated by a rhythmic thud. It was unmistakably coming from inside the church. The heavy oak doors, which they had left ajar, were now slightly more open, revealing a deeper void. Thorn pushed them fully open, and what they saw within froze them to the spot. The pews, which they had seen overturned earlier, were now rearranged, forming a chaotic, almost ritualistic circle around the altar. And on the altar, the ancient bloodstains appeared fresher, glistening dully in the flashlight beam. The word they hear seemed to pulsate with a dark, malevolent energy. But it was the center of the circle that truly horrified them. There, lying on the dusty floor, was a crude, makeshift effigy, fashioned from straw and branches, its head a grotesque lump of mud. Around it, arranged in a chilling tableau, were objects: a tarnished silver locket, a child's wooden toy horse, a rusted farming tool, a single, tiny, leather shoe, and a small, ceramic doll, its painted eyes wide and staring. Each item seemed to hum with a faint, residual energy, a psychic imprint of the lives they had belonged to. And then they heard it, distinctly, directly behind them. A low growl, not human, but something ancient, guttural, and filled with a predatory hunger. They spun around, flashlight beam whipping wildly. For a split second, they saw it. A towering, skeletal figure, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and twisted. Its head was a featureless void, but from where its eyes should have been, 2 pinpricks of malevolent red light burned in the darkness. It was cloaked in shadows, a living part of the night, and it reeked of the same metallic decay that permeated the village. Its presence was a suffocating weight, pressing down on them, stealing their breath. It didn't move, not truly. It seemed to glide, its form undulating as if it were made of smoke. The whispers around them crescendoed into a cacophony of panic screams, echoing the pleas they had heard earlier. But these were not just whispers now, they were the sounds of real, agonizing torment. The creature reached out a long, impossibly slender arm, its fingers ending in razor-sharp talons. It pointed, not at them, but at the crude effigy on the floor. And as it pointed, the objects around the effigy began to tremble, vibrating with a terrible energy. The ceramic doll's painted eyes seemed to glow faintly. A voice, not from the creature, but from the very air around them, resonated through the church, cold and ancient. They offered their whispers. They offered their pain. They offered their silence. The true, horrifying meaning of they hear and the plight of Atheria slammed into the apprentice with the force of a physical blow. The villagers hadn't vanished. They had been offered. Offered to whatever unspeakable entity dwelled here, feeding on their suffering, their very essence. The whispers, the screams, the eerie stillness, they were not residual echoes. They were the trapped, tormented souls of Atheria, eternally bound, their anguish a perverse offering, a never-ending meal for the entity. The skeletal creature took another step towards them, the red pinpricks of light in its void face growing brighter. The whispers intensified, now interspersed with guttural, wet sounds, as if something was being torn, consumed. The apprentice's blood ran cold, not just from fear, but from the horrifying realization that they, 2 unwitting intruders, had disturbed its eternal feast. Thorn, surprisingly, found his voice. "It's a feeding ground," he choked out, his eyes wide with a terror the apprentice had never seen in him. A sacrifice. They weren't abandoned. They were taken. The apprentice stumbled backward, tripping over an overturned pew. The creature advanced, surprisingly swift despite its gangly form. Its presence was a suffocating weight, pressing down on them, stealing their breath. They could feel its cold, ancient hunger radiating from it, reaching out to consume them. Their fingers, numb with terror, fumbled for the jeep keys in a pocket. Thorn, meanwhile, had dropped his flashlight, now fumbling desperately for something in his pack. The apprentice knew, with chilling certainty, that if they didn't escape, they would become another whisper in the stillness of Atheria, another offering to the thing that dwelled in its desolate heart. They scrambled to their feet, ignoring the searing pain in a twisted ankle. The creature was closer now, its form looming, obscuring the faint moonlight from the windows. They could almost feel its breath, icy and reeking of grave earth, on their faces. Its spectral hands, ending in those dreadful talons, seemed to reach for them. With a primal scream, the apprentice burst out of the church, adrenaline flooding their system. Thorn was right behind, gasping for air. They didn't look back. The sounds of tearing and the chorus of anguished whispers followed them, chasing them through the dark, deserted streets of Atheria. The apprentice fumbled with the jeep door, praying it wasn't locked, praying the engine would start. It roared to life on the third try, a glorious, sputtering sound in the oppressive silence. The apprentice slammed it into reverse, tires spitting gravel, and accelerated wildly, not daring to glance in the rearview mirror. The road back up the ridge was treacherous, but they drove like a person possessed, the red glow from the church receding behind them, shrinking into the horror that was Atheria. They didn't stop until the sun was a bright, harsh disk in the sky, miles and miles away from that cursed valley. The metallic scent still clung to their clothes, the whispers still echoed in their ears. Thorn sat beside them, pale and shaking, clutching a small, tarnished silver locket he must have snatched from the church. We need to tell someone," the apprentice stammered, their voice hoarse. Thorn looked at them, his eyes hollow. "Who would believe us?" he whispered, his gaze fixed on the locket. "And even if they did, what could they do? Some places are beyond saving. Some silences are not peaceful, but a terrifying testament to what lies beneath. And some villages aren't abandoned, they're merely waiting. Waiting for the next ear to hear." They never returned to Atheria. And for the rest of their lives, the chilling whispers, and the image of the skeletal feeder, haunted their every waking moment and invaded their darkest dreams. The silence of Atheria had spoken, and they had listened. And now, they too, were cursed to hear.
They escaped, but not untouched. The silence followed. The whispers lingered. Atheria is still out there, forgotten, but hungry. And now, you've heard it too. Like, share, and subscribe before it finds you.